Well, the last 3 days have instructed us quite a lot, not only on Christian death and burial, but also about Easter. And if you enter deeply into the Triduum, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, then this Easter will mean a lot more to you than going from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. Now, going from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday is quite a leap, because we go from the Lord's triumphal entry into Jerusalem to being denounced, being put into prison, being crucified, and dying, and being put to death. And now we have the women who have come to the tomb and discover that he is not there. The stone has been rolled away. Well, how do we get from one to the other? Well, there's a whole process. And we've been through quite a time these last 3 days, especially for those of you who attended Tenebrae. Now, for those of you not familiar with Tenebrae is what monks and nuns and hermits and canons and priests have prayed all along for at least 1,500 years, 1,600 years, maybe 1,800 years. And Tenebrae is the praying of matins and lauds on those last 3 days of the Triduum. And it's a taste really of the monastic life for all of the laity who come to that each year. And we think back to a time when perhaps even every single parish all over the world had Tenebrae. And it used to be celebrated in the evening. So it was the evening liturgy for the 3 days preceding Easter, or for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night. And the Easter Vigil in olden days, up until about, mid-last century, was also in the mornings. So that the Mass of Holy Thursday was in the morning, the Mass of Good Friday, or the service of Good Friday, was in the morning, the service of Holy Saturday was in the morning. We've had quite a shift in the last century as all of that has been switched, and our liturgy is in the evening, Tenebrae is in the morning. Well, why do I bring all this up? Well, because it's quite a day on those 3 days. 2.5 hours in Tenebrae, and then 3 hours or so in the evenings. And it's really is the carrying of the cross in the last 3 days. Now, as a side note, we think about this Tenebrae. It's 2.5 hours early in the morning in a mainly dark church, chanting the Psalms of Matins and Lauds. And I was reflecting during the last 3 days, that all the young people, the many boys who filled the sanctuary serving and singing, and the many young ladies who were out in the congregation, and the parents, that it really was a monastic discernment retreat for all Catholic children all over the world in every parish. And that is why the convents were bursting. And that is why the seminaries were full, all of those centuries, all of those millennia. That is why the religious orders flourished and multiplied, and they were all over the place. Every single charism, opening up hospitals, opening up colleges, opening up orphanages, opening up schools, opening up all sorts of charities to help the needs of society. And it is because all of those children all over the world were attending Tenebrae and getting a taste of the monastic life, or getting a taste of religious life. And so many of them, each year having done that, year after year growing up, started to think, I want to live this life all the time. I want to help the Lord, like Simon of Cyrene, to carry his cross. I want to wipe the face of the Lord like Holy Veronica. I want to weep for myself and for my children. like the women of Jerusalem. I want to stand at the foot of the cross like the beloved disciple John. I want to weep at the feet of the Lord like St. Mary Magdalene. I want to stand and experience the 7 swords of sorrow of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And through that, we realize that those penitential times are the times of the greatest joy and a profound peace of soul. And surprisingly enough, a part of us doesn't want Lent to end. It's harder to celebrate than it is to do penance. Now, some of you might be thinking, what is he talking about? That priest up there is crazy. Well, of course, we enjoy and we need more sleep now. We need to eat some meat to be good for you. Adults, you need to have a glass of wine if you are not abstaining perpetually from alcohol. We need to have some rest now. It's been a long Lent. And also, we need to realize that what we learned during this Lent and how we grew in our spiritual life during this Lent, that we need to take that forward now into this Easter. We can't go back. We can't go back to our old life. Now, I don't mean this in the way that a so-called progressive would say we can't go back. I don't mean that we can't go back to the old ways, because the old ways are based on wisdom. Our forefathers learned what worked and what didn't. And we have to learn in our own lives what works and what doesn't. The way we lived our lives before Lent should have been different than the way we lived our lives during Lent. So we have to learn now, and we have to go forward in the spiritual life, in the Christian life. And as St. Paul says, we can't feast with the old leaven. We have to be unleavened, which means that we are empty. And we need to let the Lord fill us. We need to empty ourselves. We need to die to ourselves. We have walked along the way of the cross with Christ. We have died to our old self. And actually, we did that before we were baptized. When we were baptized, we died to ourselves and we rose again to new life. And through that new life now, we've been reminded during this Lent that we cannot live like the pagans, as many Catholics do. We cannot live like pagans. We have to take those lessons of Lent, and we need to realize the value of getting up promptly in the morning. We need to recognize the value of abstaining at the times we should abstain, which continues to be every Friday. Every Friday during the year is at least a day of penance, and preferably a day of abstinence. And the bishop's request that we consider fasting every Friday during the year. Not under pain of sin, but we're asked to do so, if we can. We're asked to abstain from meat, and really we should do that every Friday through the year. But at least we need to be doing penance every Friday during the year. Now, what does that look like? What does that look like? Many people party on Friday because it's the end of the work week. They party, and then they work all day and shop on Sundays. Well, we need to do our work on Fridays and our work on Saturdays and prepare to rest on Sundays. You need to prepare to rest on Sundays with the Lord, to avoid doing your homework, avoid doing your projects, and get to Mass. We need to get to Mass on Sundays, every Sunday, not Saturday night, unless you have to. There are those who can't avoid working on Sundays, and there are certain professions that have to, but we need to take back the Lord's Day and render it back to God. Now we think about, if you attended Tenebrae you would have heard the beautiful and mournful words of Lady Sion, of daughter Sion, of the old Jerusalem. And this is what we heard about the old Jerusalem. Well, let me see if I can find that here. How lonely she is now, the once crowded city. Widowed is she who is mistress over the nations. The princess among the provinces has been made a toiling slave. Her foes are uppermost, her enemies are at ease. The Lord has punished her for her many sins. Gone from daughter Sion is all her glory. Now we can replace daughter Sion maybe with our own city that has changed so much within our lifetimes. We continue then with Good Friday. The Lord marked for destruction the wall of daughter Sion. He stretched out the measuring line. His hand brought ruin, yet he did not relent. He brought grief on wall and rampart till both succumbed. Her king and her princes are among the pagans. Priestly instruction is wanting, and her prophets have not received any vision from the Lord. Your prophets had for you false and specious visions. They did not lay bare your guilt to stir you to repentance. They behold for you in vision false and misleading portents. All who pass by clap their hands at you. They hiss and wag their heads over daughter Jerusalem. Is this the all-beautiful city, the joy of the whole earth? And on Holy Saturday we heard, those accustomed to dainty food perish in the streets. Those brought up in purple now cling to the ash heaps. Now we cannot help but think of the foodie movement here in our own city. We've all become so accustomed to dainty foods. In the Latin, the word is voluptuous food. We become so accustomed to that. And yet now we have tents lining the freeways, lining the public parks, and people whose grandmothers made pot roast every Sunday and probably laid a pretty nice table are now living among filth and human excrement. What has happened? How is it that our once beautiful city is now in desolation, and we are hanging on by a thread, clinging to the remnants of a once prosperous society? Well, it is because we have abandoned God. We've abandoned God, and it happened generations ago and gradually got worse and worse and worse. My own generation is guilty of abandoning God, of being indifferent to the ways of God, even of mocking God, mocking his laws, mocking his sacred ceremonies, and dismissing the church altogether. How did we get there? And how is it that daughter Zion, who is filthy and abandoned and shameful, how is it that now she is the beautiful, spotless bride of Christ? Well, how is it that any of us become beautiful and spotless? We've walked the way of the cross with Christ. He has suffered and he has died. And now he has given us new life. We cannot get there any other way. The world is on the brink of collapse, war, economic devastation. There's talk of food shortages. People are living on the streets. There's a desperation and so much anger. We've seen all the anger. Well, where does that get us? And how is it that we can possibly turn this around? We cannot possibly turn this around. It has to be the work of God. And how is he going to do it? He's going to suffer and sweat blood and take all the sins of the world upon him and be spat upon and mocked and despised and rejected. And he's going to die for those who hate him in order to give them new life. Now, I'm standing up here in these beautiful clothes, and this church is decorated in a beautiful manner. And how did we get here? Well, first we had to go through the Passion. And first we had to fast and deny ourselves and weep and die with Christ in order to come to all this. These fancy clothes, these beautiful clothes of a priest, well, I'm a miserable sinner. And how did I get from being a miserable sinner to the glory and splendor of Easter Sunday? Well, I didn't do anything to deserve it. God cleaned me up, washed me clean by baptism, picked me up out of a life that could have led to a destruction. Gave me his heart, gave me his love, and gave me his life. And dying to myself, being ordained a priest, and being dressed in these beautiful garments to celebrate the Mass. Well, that's God's work. It's not my work. It is not my work at all. And I have done nothing to deserve it. But I'm grateful to God for it. And I hope that you are grateful to God for all that God has given you. Now you have to think that this is reciprocal. He gives because he wants something back. It has to be a two-way friendship. You can't have a friend who just gives and gives and gives and gives. And maybe you feel that about some of your friends. I give and I give and I give, and what do I get in return? I've heard people say that. Maybe we all say that in our hearts, in our minds. I give and I give and I give. Well, that's what God does. He gives and he gives and he gives. And what does he get in return? He's despised. He's rejected. And he still gives. Now, for those of us who are faithful, or who try to be faithful, we give a little something back. But we still despise the Lord every time we fall into sin. And we still crucify him by our mortal sins. And we drive him out from our souls. And how is it that we can possibly turn that around? How is it that we can possibly save ourselves? Is it that we could forgive our own sins? Well, we can't do that. We need to rely on God for that. God can bring about change in the world, and we have to cooperate with him. God can bring about changes in us, but we have to cooperate with him. He will not do it without our consent. We have to allow him to do that, and we have to cooperate with him. And what we do in these bodies is very important. So we've learned the value of fasting. We've learned the value of penance. We've learned the value of self-denial. We've learned the value of prayer, generosity with God. And we've experienced the joy of Lent and Passiontide and the Triduum. And now we have an altogether new joy, new life. Let us not waste this new life. Let us not celebrate like the pagans who have no hope. Let us not celebrate with the old leaven, our old ways of life, away from God. Let us take what we've learned from Lent now and continue in our new life, in peace of soul. But enjoy this Easter. But don't enjoy it too much. Have a glass of wine, but don't drink too much wine. Have some cake, but don't eat the whole thing. Enjoy yourselves. But realize what it's all about. It's not just about feasting. It's about the new life that God has given us that we don't deserve. And yet, he continues to give and give and give. Well, and we need to receive and receive and receive so that we can give back to it. So I wish you a very blessed Easter. And we still have a lot to do. We have now this whole Easter season to grow in the spiritual life. And we still have to learn what Easter is really all about. This is only the beginning. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.